Coming up today on The Story.
Rod and I got on very well, and sitting in his office chatting, because it was hot, I had a shirt on, and he saw the scar that I have down the middle of my chest, which is from open heart surgery done back in the day. So he saw the scar and he said, "What's that from?" And I said, "Oh, it was from this heart surgery I had when I was a kid." And he started crying.
The Story.
G'day, I'm Jimmy Colefax. Welcome to The Story. Well, Pete Court is a lecturer in creative writing and communication at Tabor University in Adelaide, and he teaches students how to write effective stories. The irony is that his own personal story is one of the best I've ever read and has been entered into several short story competitions. So, we've invited him to share it with us today. Pete Court is chatting with Eric Scatterbo and joins us from a radio station in Adelaide.
Pete, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me. Lovely to be here.
Glad to have you with us. And I should say that being on the radio is something you're very comfortable with because you've produced and presented breakfast radio for many commercial and Christian radio stations over the years. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
Yeah, I have indeed. I love the flying by the seat of the pants live radio thing very, very much, which is totally opposite to the short story planning and writing and creating. Just the anything can possibly happen kind of joy in radio I love, yeah.
And as we'll hear today, radio plays a big part in your story.
It does, yeah. Probably doesn't start there, though.
Okay.
The story actually starts, probably my story starts in a lunatic asylum.
Is that right?
Which seems quite logical. Yeah, my dad, my dad's a psychologist, and so is my mum as well, but he was actually working at a place called the Crichton, which is in Scotland.
Okay, I was a little curious there about the asylum, so that explains it.
Yeah, there you go. He was working as it was a mental hospital and a Borstal, a boys' remand home in Scotland, and it's still well known today. But he was working there as a psychologist. I was born then. Shortly afterwards, Mum and Dad Dad got a gig here at the Adelaide University of Adelaide, and they came over here. I was just born when they hopped on the boat, because it was back when boats were a thing. And they sailed over here. They were 10-pound poms, I believe is the term, although I think my dad weighed a little bit more than that. And they came over with, I had two older sisters, and I was the very quiet newborn son. And so they got to Australia, and I think my two sisters got measles or chicken pox or something, and so they went to the doctor, and I was 7-8 months old at the time, and so they all the kids got bundled off to the doctor, and the doctor said, "Yeah, the girls are fine, they'll get better, and your son will be fine. The chicken pox shouldn't affect his heart condition." And Mum's gone, "What?" Because they'd spent, come all this way, and the doctor goes, yeah, he's got a heart murmur. You didn't sorry, know that? Whoops.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So Mum has sort of gone, whoa, they've got it checked out, and the diagnosis was basically, it's called a patent foramen ovale, basically a hole in the heart. Kids would still get it today, and it's quite easy fix now. But back then, the diagnosis was, that's why he's so quiet. And that blue lip thing, that's what that is. It's where the blood basically goes through the wrong side of the heart and comes out the wrong way and doesn't quite go back through the lungs, and you don't get enough oxygen. And it's not a good thing.
Yeah.
It's not doing what your heart's meant to do.
Yeah. And
the doctor said, he'll be fine. Take him home and just enjoy the last few months of his life.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, and Mum's just gone, it's chicken pox, and he's gone, no, it's really not. So, cut a long story short, they went and saw some people, and because I think part of it may have had to do with the fact that my dad was working at the university at the time, they were able to go into the hospital there. Curiously, this is sort of mid-60s.
Yeah.
I only found out since doing research into this that there wasn't a cardiac unit, there wasn't a heart unit at the hospital.
Oh.
Hospitals didn't have heart surgery units because heart surgery wasn't something you did. There was no way of stopping the human heart, operating on it, and restarting it again.
Oh.
It just didn't happen.
Yeah.
If you had a hole in your heart, there was no way they could get into it. I think they worked that you could have, maybe if you brought the temperature down and put everybody in an ice chest, you could operate on them with a very slow beating heart, and maybe you'd get 5 minutes of operation time. An open heart surgery takes hours. So, nobody's surviving that. Nobody's living through that at that time. So there wasn't even a heart unit. There was a tuberculosis ward at that time. tuberculosis had just been cured and cleared up. They'd sort of got rid of tuberculosis, so there was a discussion, what do we do with this ward? Let's turn it into a cardiac ward, because there isn't such a thing, and hopefully the heart surgery technology is going to get better. So that's kind of the situation into which I was dropped as a child. So it was just beginning. And it's in Adelaide, middle of nowhere, back into the world, And they've just come from, England, basically the pinnacle of medical research and all that, to here. And they're just going, oh, God, what have you done? And the whole thing was, it was just a miraculous collection of things that just shouldn't have happened. Because, of course, the other piece of history is at this time in history, the great breakthroughs in heart surgery were all coming from South Africa.
Oh, okay.
There was a whole lot of research was going on, and they did the first open heart surgeries really effectively. And it was the group that came from there who did the first heart transplants much, much, much later. But the university and hospitals in South Africa sent teams around the world to go and show, this is what we've learned, what do you think? So this was very, very, very early days. The heart-lung machine itself, which is the great breakthrough in the technology, really was just it just leaked blood everywhere and air came in it, and it was just you had to have a technician and a guy with a spanner standing next to it constantly all the time, kicking it and putting on new gaff tape, and it was just really, really very, as my parents would say, very Heath Robinson, very stuck together and very glued together. So it was just a terrifying time to be a parent with a child undergoing heart surgery.
Oh, yeah.
So they were in a church when they came here and found a church that was home, and the church, everyone got together and prayed, and they sort of thought, okay, well, I guess this kid's going, so, let's pray that it's a good grieving process and all this sort of stuff. My parents, both, as I say, psychologists and counsellors, so they were aware that all this stuff was going to happen, and, the grief counselling and what they needed to take care of, and all that's fine until it's your own kid.
Oh, yeah.
But the rest, I found out a couple of years ago that my mum and dad actually got to the point of saying in the prayer meeting and with the church, sitting down and going, okay, all we want to pray is that if God wants him, he'll take him. If we get to keep him, that would be wonderful. We'd like to keep him, but if he has to go, let's make that as wonderful and as useful as it can be. And that was their prayer. They basically said, God, you want him, you can have him. And I guess the now that I think about it, from my point of view, the sad thing is that God said, no, I don't want him. No, God said, no, wait.
Well, you're here on the radio today.
Yeah, exactly. God said, no, you keep him. No, but actually God said, no, wait, you're going to love this. You're going to love this. There appeared on the doorstep the group of doctors from South Africa who came in and said, oh, yeah, we can show you how to try and practice open heart surgery. Now, it's not really effective and it doesn't always work, but, let's give it a crack, shall we?
Oh, wow.
So they were turning up, in a few months' time, and so had to go through all the process of getting healthy and fit and doing all this sort of stuff and making sure that the kid could survive and all this. And all the preparation and the months of the waiting for these guys to come. They went to Sydney first and did some operations over there, and then they came to Adelaide. And what was going to be the first ever open heart surgery on an infant in Australia was what they had planned. So long story short, they got me, cut me open, stitched the hole up, put it back together, and it's fine.
Well, okay.
So the amazing thing is I have had absolutely no sort of physical downside or physical sort of impacts from that ever since, and I've been incredibly healthy. In fact, this evening I'm going out to play hockey again at a very high level. I still keep playing sport and I cycle all the way. So my heart's working fine, which is a good thing.
Wow, that's fantastic. So a tremendous success story.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
However, underlying all of this and all of the stuff that has since come out since I found it, what really struck me was, it would have been a good 30 years later. I was in radio. I was working at a radio station called KAFM, which is now Triple M Adelaide. I was working at KAFM. I was producing their breakfast show and was doing a great job and having fun. And part of my skill, expertise, joy is doing things that haven't been done before and trying to do things new and interesting ways with radio, which means quite frequently I break equipment.
I'm glad you're in Adelaide today.
Yeah. Well, you know how it goes when you want to make this sound effect or you want to get a microphone. You want people to hear the rain outside. So you drag the microphone out there and go, oh, yeah, that's not worked very well, has it? That sort of thing.
Okay. All right.
I had a love-hate relationship and on-again, off-again friendship with the chief engineer at KF at the time. His name was Rod. Was a lovely guy, and we got on very well. And he'd roll his eyes every time I walked in with a broken piece of equipment. Sorry, we wanted to see how fast the car would go with this strapped underneath it, that sort of thing. So Rod and I got on very well, and he was leaving. He was actually quitting the station on a really hot day. It was one of those heat wave Adelaide days where everything melts. It was like 45 degrees or something.
Oh, wow.
He was up in his third floor of the building in his workshop. And I came in middle of the day to say goodbye because it's breakfast and I'd done breakfast radio. I was coming home. So we had a beer. Got a beer out of the fridge in the staff room, and we had a beer and sitting in his office chatting. And because it was hot, I had a shirt on, and he saw the scar that I have down the middle of my chest, which is from open heart surgery done back in the day. Now, the surgery is a keyhole. It's a tiny pinprick sort of under the armpit. Back then, they actually literally cut you open down the middle, spread you out, and just had the whole thing open pretty much.
Yeah.
So he saw the scar and he said, what's that from? And I said, it was from this heart surgery I had when I was a kid. And he said, what was it? And I just briefly explained it to him. And he started crying.
You're listening to The Story. Today, Eric Scatterbo is chatting with Pete Court, who's a lecturer in creative writing at Tabor University in Adelaide. Pete's sharing his own personal story, which he's entered into several short story competitions. He'll read for us the ending of that story, and we'll find out why his co-worker began to cry when we return.
The Story.